if you are like us, you've got music in your head, music in your soul, and you are ready for a party. So let's get it in with Samson.
Whoop, whoop.
Oh, yes, sir. Derek brings the guns.
When I was at Bible school, to Dave Sawatsky, I remember he
Mm.
came up to me, Dave, if you're watching this, and he comes up to me dead serious, and he's like, "Derek, I've been praying about this. I've been praying a lot, and I feel like the Lord has finally spoken to me about you." And he said that, "Derek, it's okay if you want to kiss my muscles." Kiss my muscles. And he would go like that. Like dead serious. And so when I think of Samson, I think of Dave Swatsky and a little bit
Excellent.
about his hairy bagel. But anyway,
Oh,
that's my
w-
introduction.
there you are. Well, good morning, good evening, good day, and welcome to Calling from the Wilderness. This is, we're on our 30th session, our 30th recorded session, which, for those of you who are counting, you might think that's 30 too many, but we are in motion and we are not slowing down. So this is session 30. We're looking at Samson today. It's our fourth week at looking at Samson, and so we're going to be revisiting the passages we've been looking at over the 3 weeks before this, and looking forward to kind of reflecting on this character, which I think all people who have ever actually read the Bible. Which I didn't do this till I was 20. So I'm not, not pointing fingers here, but, if you've actually read the Bible, Samson is not the character that he is portrayed as in the children's Bible stories. And I don't think that's an entirely bad thing. And it's really worthwhile I've been finding over the last weeks, a chance to really kind of sit in and soak in parts of his story and ask those questions about, how easy it is to point the finger, even if he's not that character we want him to be, or to elevate him and still to miss out on that kind of parts of his own kind of life and struggle. So that's where we're at today, looking at Samson, wondering about what is going on in his life and how, if anything, that can relate to what's going on in our own lives. My name's Timothy Miller, and I'm a priest in the Church of England over in London, England, right now, in a little area called Highgate. Priest in charge of a couple of parish churches here, joined by my fantastic friend and lovely host, not co-host, because we just kind of share the joy here. And Derek Wilson at St. Andrew's Presbyterian in Duncan, BC. So we're on different sides of the world, and almost we decided opposite sides of the world who could make a world sandwich, but that's in an episode way before. And maybe that was the episode you thought we should have stopped at, but we're going. We're going. We're going.
That was the one. That was the straw that broke the camel's back.
That's where we lost our one listener, and we've been trying to gain them back ever since. But if this is your first time with us, you're really good to be with you. The purpose of this is literally just to sit in smaller passages of Holy Scripture and ask God what God is saying in it. Work at trying to undo some of the lenses and interpretations that we've been given over the years that have insisted upon certain definitions and understandings, to really recognize how kind of big and great God is, and just what God is calling us to now. So we do this by, as I say, looking at a passage of scripture, we have it read, we have some silence, and then we invite an opportunity to just think about the things that are jumping out to us, whether it's a word or a phrase. Ask any kind of initial questions, and then we set a timer for 20 minutes, and we cover whatever ground and then some that we can in that 20 minutes. So as we always say, you need to buckle up and be ready for anything, which may or may not have anything to do with what we're looking at today.
Yeah,
Anything you'd like
for
to add,
our
Derek?
2-minute talk on Samson and our 18-minute talk on why the sky's blue. Do that. All right.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to
Let's
share here, and Derek's going to kick us off with the read. This morning, as I say, looking at the life of Samson, looking particularly at Judges chapter 13, verses 2-5 and 19-25, and chapter 14, verses 1-20 in the English Standard Version. Take it away, Derek.
There was a certain man of Zorah, of the tribe of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and had no children. The angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, Behold, you are barren and have not borne children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Therefore be careful and drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean. For behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. No razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite of God from the womb, and he shall begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines. Manoah took the youngest goat with the grain of offering and offered it to the rock to the Lord, to the one who works wonders, and Moana and his wife were watching. And when the flame went up toward heaven from the altar, the angel of the Lord went up into the flame of the altar. Now Manoah and his wife were watching, and they fell on their faces to the ground. The angel of the Lord appeared no more to Manoah and his wife. And Manoah knew that he was the angel of the Lord. And Manoah said to his wife, We shall surely die, for we have seen God. But his wife said to him, If the Lord had meant to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and grain offering at our hands, or shown us all these things, or now announced to us such things as these. And the woman bore a son and called his name Samson. And the young man grew, and the Lord blessed him. And the Spirit of the Lord began to stir in Manhani Dan between Zorah and Eshtaol.
So Samson went down to Timnah, and at Timnah he saw one of the daughters of the Philistines. Then he came up and told his father and mother, I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines at Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. But his father and mother said to him, Is there not a woman among the daughters of your relatives or among all our people that you must go and take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? But Samson said to his father, Get her for me, for she is right in my eyes. His father and mother did not know that it was from the Lord, for he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. At that time, the Philistines ruled over Israel. Then Samson went down with his father and mother to Timnah, and they came to the vineyards of Timnah. And behold, a young lion came towards him roaring. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and although he had nothing in his hand, he tore the lion in pieces, as one tears a young goat. But he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and she was right in Samson's eyes. After some days he returned to take her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion. And behold, there was a swarm of bees in the body of the lion and honey. He scraped it out into his hands and went on eating as he went. And he came to his father and mother and gave some to them and they ate. But he did not tell them that he had scraped the honey from the carcass of the lion. His father went down to the woman, and Samson prepared a feast there, for so the young men used to do. As soon as the people saw him, they brought 30 companions to be with him. And Samson said to them, Let me now put a riddle to you. If you can tell me what it is within the 7 days of the feast and find it out, then I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes. But if you cannot tell me what it is, then you shall give me 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes. And they said to him, Put your riddle, that we may hear it. And he said to them, Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. And in 3 days they could not solve the riddle.
On the fourth day they said to Samson's wife, Entice your husband to tell us what the riddle is, lest we burn you and your father's house with fire. Have you invited us here to impoverish us? And Samson's wife wept over him and said, You only hate me, you do not love me. You have put up a riddle to my people, and you have not told me what it is. And he said to her, Behold, I have not told my father nor my mother, and shall I tell you? She wept before him the 7 days that their feast lasted. And on the seventh day he told her, because she pressed him hard. And she told the riddle to her people. And the men of the city asked to him on the seventh day before the sun went down, What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? And he said to them, If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would have not found out my riddle. And the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and he went down to Ascalon, and struck down 30 men of the town and took their spoil and gave the garments to those who had told the riddle. In hot anger, he went back to his father's house, and Samson's wife was given to his companion, who had been his best man.
Well, there you go, Derek. What is there any kind of words or phrases or anything that's jumped out to you as we've been reading through this morning?
Jumped out to me like a young lion that I'm supposed to wrestle and rip apart like Samson.
I
Yeah,
want to hear.
well,
I'm
a
ready
couple
for it.
things that we've already talked
Mm,
about, which I'm sure we'll get back into. Um,
mm,
but the other thing is that kind of stuck out to me this time is the garments, the 30 garments. The
mm,
guys bet it, even though they would, I guess, impoverish them because they're expensive.
mm,
But when Samson went down and beat the guys up and stole their garments and gave it
mm,
to them, were they soaked in blood? Like, did these guys just receive bloody garments and be like, what
mm,
happened here? And
mm,
how am I still alive?
mm.
And like, are
Yeah.
they dirty? Like, what's the
Mm.
state of these garments? Because I doubt Samson took them to be dry cleaned before he.
Yeah, he's not a monster, Derek.
I a laundromat.
Yeah,
I pressed
yeah,
them. I
yeah,
folded them. They're all nice and
yeah.
put them in a little package.
Yeah, I'm not bitter. I'm not bitter.
He stuck them in a
Yeah,
carcass of a lion and just handed it to him. A lion full of honey and linens.
yeah, yeah. It's just gross, but yeah, maybe it's a new thing. I just don't realize yet.
It's all
Um,
the rage in Paris, I
yeah.
guess. I don't
the
get that.
there you go. The words and phrases that jumped out to me were ones that I really didn't think at all about in all the weeks that we've read before. And I guess we were just before we recorded, we're talking about kind of the difference between like wine and strong drink, um, and or the difference between kind of water, wine, and strong drink. And I guess I always really struck that like wine in many ways was the safe thing to drink back in the day, and yet he's told not to drink it. And there's something, yeah, something about kind of a question for me about that kind of entrusting, similar to like Daniel, entrusting your health and well-being to God and doing the thing that culturally seems opposite to that, but it isn't. Yeah, it is for that kind of sense of trust, I guess, maybe similar to the Sabbath. And then I was really struck, again, yeah, the whole story about just taking honey into your hand, like just eating it out of your hands on the go and then giving some to your parents. It's just weird.
And sticky hands. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. My parents would never thank me for that.
No, it's like
Um,
here's some honey.
yeah,
Nom, nom, nom,
but
nom.
then I think just going on to your one here though too. One thing, um, I never realized that this part here in verse 12, at the very end of verse 12, when he's talking to them about the riddle, he says, let me put a riddle to you. If you can tell me what it is within the 7 days of the feast and find it out, then I will give you 30. So there was like this challenge of, even from that point, which I hadn't read before, which is like, I'm not expecting you just to kind of know it, but can you even figure it out? Um,
Mhm.
which is obviously why they press the wife and everything like that
Yeah.
for it. But yeah, yeah. And then you've got, it ends with, the classic, story of where the bride goes off with the best man. It was in the Bible before it even started hitting Hollywood and the big screen. So,
It's a Jane Austen movie story.
excellent. Is there anything specific you want to, or shall I just start the clock and see where we go?
Let's just start the clock.
All right.
The clock.
So where do you want to start, Derek?
um. Okay, with the linens,
Yeah, yeah.
how is Samson gonna pay if he didn't do it? Like he had that much confidence that they weren't gonna guess it,
Hmm.
but like he put himself in that predicament. He's the one that started it, and like all
Yeah.
these different things, he's the one that keeps almost inviting this stuff on him. Like, I'm not saying he's victim
Yeah.
blaming or whatever, but
Yeah.
he's walking alone. He gets attacked by a lion. I don't know if that's common or not, but kills it. Fine. He goes and
I've
picks
never
a
experienced that,
Philistine
so
woman, like a Philistine woman, to be his wife, and she ends up, then he picks this riddle and gives it to the guys, and then his Philistine wife that he picked is now being threatened with burning down her and her family and the house and everything. And of course she's going to try to do it, and instead of figuring out another way, he just like if your wife was being threatened like that, wouldn't you try to do something to help? Like, wouldn't you be like, oh, you know what, I'm going to go beat up the guys that are threatening you, or I'm going to go tell them that this is off because you guys are being mean or something. I wouldn't just tell my wife the answer and then get upset that she gave it away. Like, she's being threatened with death in the family. So like all these things, and then read on Delilah and stuff like that. Like, he keeps putting himself in these situations. But why does he do that? Like, is it just because his strength? And has he not learned that his strength can be taken away? Like at the end of the story, spoiler alert, read the book of Samson, or read the story of Samson. But he loses his strength, and then he ends up getting it back, and not because he did something great, just because he's like, I want to kill as many Philistines as possible. Like, he still hasn't learned his lesson. He still is putting himself in these situations, and at the end of the story is the one time his strength doesn't get him out of that, or God doesn't get him out of that. If the Spirit's on him, like, it's almost like he just expected it to work out and to happen every time. And I wonder if that's both an encouragement to us that we can step out because God is going to be there and do that kind of stuff, but also a caution to us to be like, make sure you're stepping out in the right way, because even though God's grace and stuff is going to help you through it if you've got the right intentions in prayer and stuff like that, there's going to be a point where you're going to step out there. You keep testing the Lord, and maybe sometimes one time that test isn't going to work out for you.
Yeah, I do think that's an important distinction, particularly looking at Samson's life, which is that, like, we read into the story that Samson was like this big burly strong guy, and then his strength became like super strength when the Spirit came upon him. But by the stories, like, he's not somebody who seems threatening within himself. It's he starts to become a threat when these things that he shouldn't be able to do happen. And I think, like, there's this I couldn't watch the whole thing. I do apologize to whoever made and directed the film. There's a Samson film on Amazon Prime.
I've seen clips, but I haven't seen the whole thing.
And it was just, but it's based upon, like, the sense that, like, Samson is just this beefcake who he's got strength, and then he's got, like, the Spirit of God's super strength. And that's how I always imagined it. And as you say, like, so what we're looking at is like the strong guy who obviously was intimidating within himself, and then we've got, like, the blessing of God through the Spirit, which makes him like untouchable, like Superman kind of thing. And then it's like the downfall is that he gives away that secret to Delilah, which, as you say, he's got this pattern of giving away secrets and then blaming people for the secrets that he's given away. But actually, there's that kind of sense that actually he was just a man who then has these extraordinary moments of God being with him and him accomplishing things. And as you say, what's difficult when you look at Samson's life is that there seems to be no, until kind of the final kind of chapter of his life with the Philistines, when he's in slavery and he's enslaved, there seems to be no acknowledgement that like he's actually complicit with what's happened to him. And there seems to be no like in the story, I'm so surprised as we're reading again today, is like he never seems to be one who cries out to God. Like even the lion attacks and he just thinks to himself, I'm going to be fine because God's chosen me, and kind of walks into it, and the Spirit of God comes over him. And then like even with this thing, like, he goes and he's just like, I can't pay this debt now through this riddle. And the Spirit of God comes upon him. There's no sense that there's nothing in the story that indicates that he, like, he crawled down on his knees and cried out to God and said, look, I'm in a situation, I can't figure this out, I've got nowhere to go, can you please help me? And then it's just like, and that makes it really difficult. And I know we've kind of talked about kind of different pieces like that, but his story I find really difficult for that. But I think the thing where I've got kind of a soft spot for Samson comes to something I can't remember if I said it in the beginning, but listening to the podcast, The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, which is a fantastic podcast by Christianity Today, if you want to look at some kind of long form journalism and have a really kind of balanced view of kind of a story and a situation in kind of modern Christendom. But one of the things that said by one of the people who's interviewed was he said, he was talking about himself and other leaders who came up in Mars Hill. And he said, we had the gifts, but we didn't have the character for the calling. And that just resonates so strongly with me when it comes to Samson's story. Like even when he says, he sees a woman, he's like, get that woman for my wife. And you're like, who talked? Like, yeah, I understand, like, the way that
culturally it might have been.
Culturally, yeah, but but there's an immaturity to that, like, like even like culturally, again, you have, we've looked at the story of Isaac and Jacob, and like Jacob goes and he talks to his uncle and says, look, I want to take, he doesn't just like walk up and be like, her give me, right? and that's what we kind of, I feel like we get a little bit from Samson. But there's something about, like, and sorry, as an aside, Samson's dad doesn't seem like somebody who's maybe has grown up as much either, with his kind of extreme, oh my God, I've seen God, I'm gonna die, oh everything's fine, I've got a strong son.
The nameless woman is the most sensible one in this family.
Yeah. And so I would say, like there's something about that, and I think so. I've got that soft spot for Samson because I feel like there's something about the way that his character and his person, just didn't get the chance to grow until that moment where it was like becomes his final act, with the Philistines, after he's enslaved. And there's like, and so like there's this sadness to his story where there's a calling, there's an obvious need for that calling, but there's not the time and the investment and the maturity for that calling to actually ever become realized, without it being something that in the end actually hurts him, hurts the people that he, as you say, like that he cares for, like who would kind of just turn their back on their wife and family, just to win a bet, kind of thing. But as you say, and underpinning this is something that you've reminded us of over the last few weeks too. It's just like the unexpected places is where kind of, truth, maturity, and kind of groundedness often comes. And in Samson's story, it's through his mother, the one person who is kind of, steadfast, who kind of had a sense of reality and groundedness of their story and of their calling. And I can imagine, like, if she wasn't in his life, you can only imagine the chaos it could have been. But
yeah. Well, two things. One is, Samson's got the gift, and he goes out into situations because he knows he's got the gift, and he kind of puts himself in these situations like we talked about. And now I'm looking at my own life and I'm thinking, well, what are some times that I did not step out because of fear of God not being with me? Like whether it be helping out someone financially, oh, this is gonna, I'm never gonna recover from this if I give this money to this person to help them or something. Instead of saying, okay, well, God's got my back, or give my time to this, or step out and talk to a neighbor or whatever it be, like these different times that I failed to be like Samson and just put myself in these situations knowing that God will work everything out, right? That everything will work out one way or another. Um, so I think my soft spot for Samson is he had that. It just wasn't put in the right way. Like it wasn't the right situations to make those steps. It was they were selfish steps instead of helping people steps. My other thing would I'm just thinking out loud here. But we always like Samson had all this strength and he was called and stuff, even though like the verse we read said he would start to defeat the Philistines. And we're always like, oh, he missed all this potential. He had all this. He could have done all these great things, but what if that's just what he was supposed to be? Like, what if we are our interpretation of the story and him not fulfilling his potential is not the right point of the story that we're supposed to pick up on? That actually was him fulfilling his potential, like you said, without the character or something. That was as far as he was going to go. But it's the I don't know, maybe that doesn't make sense. I was just thinking
No, yeah. Oh, go finish.
yeah,
Finish it.
because I think last week we talked about looking at different people and that and being like, oh, like they're not reaching their potential, they're doing all this stuff, and we're not just seeing them for who they are and not trying to put this expectation of greatness on them. Like Samson, we've got this expectation. God has given you this gift. You, if you do, if you succeed in it and you do everything, then this is the plateau you're supposed to be on. Instead of just seeing Samson for who he is and walking with his journey and with the people we meet, being like, oh, God's given you the gift, painting, music, whatever, and you're like, oh, well, if you give it over to God, this is the expectation, this is the plateau you're going to hit, instead of just walking with them or leadership or whatever it may be. Well, this is the expectation of you now, is to be this person here, and not everyone is called to be this person or should be expected to be this person. They're expected to be who they are. And we may miss what God's doing in them and the beginnings they've started. Like Samson was the beginning, he started it. We may miss what God is beginning in someone or doing through someone because we're too busy focusing on the end result instead of the journey.
I think that's really, really good. I think that's really important. And as you say, like there's an intention in the way that Samson's story is recorded. That whether it's hindsight or whether it was prophecy before he was born, there's an intention that the word is he shall begin to save his people. And yeah, what I was really struck when you were talking with both your points there about what if, as you say, like Samson's calling was to be the catalyst. It wasn't meant to be an end in itself. He wasn't meant to be the white the white savior, the savior of all things, but actually was meant to be the catalyst. And so a catalyst is only useful if it's in context with something else that it ignites, right? Like, and I think the sad thing about Samson's story, which I know we touched on last week, was like the sense like he seems like somebody who's just utterly alone. Even like he's got people around him, but he, it's like even his parents, he doesn't like he's with his parents, but not. He gets a wife but doesn't. He's got people around him but not. And and so there is that sense, and interestingly too, like with Samson's story, is like there's I don't know of any other you have to reread the whole thing, but any other moments where he's like with his own people, so like the people that he's meant to be kind of in kind of conversation and in relationship with, to be a part of them being kind of saved from the Philistines together, he just seems to have no relationship with. And whether that is, as you say, the pressure on somebody who has that sense of calling to then try to hold and save all things, which we see, later on in the life of Saul, in ways too with the life of David and others. It's not an uncommon thing. And actually, as you've highlighted now, that was like the key issue people struggled with the life of Jesus, was they wanted him to kind of come in, dominate the universe. And he's like, oh yes, I'm going to do that by giving my life.
Yeah.
And the catalyst that happens through Jesus happens because he surrounded himself with people who, when Jesus starts the ministry or starts the mission, it becomes a fire that sets other people alight, and they become the fire. Like none of them are an end in themselves, but as part of a community becomes something that actually spreads wider. And I think, as you say, like one of the sad things about Samson's story is that it feels like everything that he did and all those things that he was called to was never able to be appreciated and understood, because it didn't fit that picture of total saving. But he also didn't have people close enough to him that had that kind of grassroots inspiration that kind of caught the vision of what his calling was, to see that maybe where their calling was different, but how they might have actually all worked together.
Yeah. Like I wonder, I'd have to read the story again because I may be uh, putting something in there that's not there. But I
Never
wonder if
happens. Never happens.
it happens. Little ice of Jesus. It's fine. But I wonder if that not having friends or people to call him out is because he considered himself, his calling, to be higher than the average person. Like I'm above you kind of thing. I'd have to read this story again,
We
and
we
and I don't want to do that. But I see people who have the calling and like have separated themselves from
mm,
people like
yeah,
society, like friends and stuff, because get into the whole holiness talk, but I don't want to
mm,
dirty myself, or I don't want to lose my calling, or I don't want to, that fear of it. um
yeah,
or just I've been called to this. I'm
mm,
not, I'm better than you. Like
yeah.
I'm like
Well, there's
I just you're
yeah.
not as important. But
But we also, can I say, we also don't do a good job, at least in my experience in the church,
yeah,
of actually walking with people, especially once something of their calling is actualized. So you hear stories about young children who are up on stages prophesying and praying for healings, which obviously God working through all people is just so important to hold on to, and
yeah,
it is always outside of the categories we want. But what doesn't happen then is, like, that's not held. It's not usually then held in a context of something else, that we also want to give ourselves, whether it's those people who kind of set themselves apart because they don't want to be contaminated or
yeah,
touched or brought down by other people who don't appreciate or understand their vocation and calling. But also too, we, as soon as we see those things, we like to just kind of give it all, right? Like, we don't say, oh, that's really great, now what does it mean to kind of walk together in this? We're like, that person's doing that, we all need to go there and get some of that. And this person has the gift, so we need to go to them. And it's always in that absolutism. It's like, we don't see it as that person has a calling or a part of the gift or a part of the ministry of the body, which Paul challenges us to think about. But we're like, that is the gift. And again, the thing I'm challenged with is, especially as you were talking this morning, was that sense of, like, Jesus, who we believe to be like the pinnacle of human existence, and and God in flesh, it is somebody who doesn't do the whole thing himself.
Yeah.
And yet we like, so Jesus has done this, and so but this person somehow is doing something better than that, bigger than that, and then we let them be isolated, or we isolate ourselves from them, or what, and it's just like we break down the barriers of like doing this in community, having that responsibility, taking the responsibility as a community. Like if a pastor, or a priest or a minister or a leader, whatever it might be, kind of steps out on something, we throw them under the bus. We don't say, actually, this has been a failure of us as a community, because we let that isolation and things like that happen. So sorry,
Yeah.
I
Well,
cut
it's
you off.
also the calling, like those people who do they turn to when things don't go right? Right? Like
Yeah,
when things get hard and stuff, because everyone has built something up for them in their own mind.
yeah,
And then if they doubt, or they stumble or something, they have nowhere to go, so then they hide it, and then it comes out later that after hiding things for so long in the dark,
yeah,
they grow, and then they come out, right? But
yeah,
there's no people walking with them being like, for good or bad,
yeah,
I'm here and I'm going to help you do this,
mhm,
but I'm also going to support you when you can't do it yourself. Like I'm
yeah,
walking side by side,
yeah,
the footprints, the poem, like I'm going to carry you through the
yeah,
hard time,
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
thing,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah.
So I was going to say something else about that, but I can't remember what it was.
Well, that's 20 minutes. So feel free to throw in your final bomb.
You got a bomb?
I know. I just think one of the things I feel that I wasn't expecting to feel is like Samson's story is actually very complicated, and it feels like a failure on so many levels, but one that, as we've just been saying, has so much to do with isolation, and isolation which doesn't allow and have that support, and doesn't have the care for each other as part of the
Uh,
community, but also that lack of an ability where like people might feel like their gift and their calling isn't important and isn't valuable because it's not held in community, where it becomes a catalyst for something else. And I feel like we're just, yeah, I just feel like even in my own kind of life in the church right now, I'm asking, who have I not, like, who have I not encouraged or supported or plugged in enough, because it doesn't kind of fit the programs or the, what we think the church should be doing. And now we as the church are losing out on them being able to kind of, live their ministry and vocation out in the church, um, and potentially causing those places where people will then have every reason to feel like they are either alone or need to be alone to be able to walk the way that God has called them. And that's hard.
yeah. The only thing I would say to that is I when if we're doing that and we're walking with people and stuff like that, I'm hesitant to say, you find someone who's got a good calling and then you walk with them and stuff,
Mm,
and then because then that, not saying you're saying that, but then the other thing to that is, well, if you don't see someone with a calling, then you don't necessarily walk with them. Like they don't I don't want people's value tied in with what their calling is. I just want people to walk with people because they are created, like they are children
mm,
of God. And I don't care if you are the best speaker, and I don't care if you are the best artist, and I don't care if you're meant to save the world or you're meant to do what society would say is very little. I like whatever it may be. I just want you to have someone to walk with. Like I just want someone to see you and accept you for who you are. So even with Samson, like even if he was just a regular person without the strength and without the calling and stuff like that, he still should have had someone walking with
yeah.
him
Mm,
and talking with him, right?
Mm.
um, and not, and even like me now, I'm thinking about people who I've noticed had a calling, and I've walked with them a certain amount,
Mm.
not necessarily as much as I probably should have, and then hard times or whatever happens. But as soon as that kind of calling dies off, or changes, or whatever, then it's like, oh, okay, then I don't need to do this anymore. I can focus over here on someone else who's on fire or whatever it may be, right? But there's
Yeah.
not like we like like society and the church, we place value on people. Like if someone's a really good singer or they're really good at praying and stuff like that, then everyone wants to be like them, and everyone wants to encourage
Mm.
them, and everyone wants to walk with them, and
Mm.
and be part of that awesomeness. And then it's the
Mm.
people that are kind of quiet and stuff like that, you're like, oh no, it's you know I'll say hi to you and stuff, and if you need anything, let me know, but I'm not going to necessarily walk with you.
Mm.
And then I think maybe Samson is a cautionary tale to us, that even the people that are have a huge calling are still gonna fail sometimes.
Mm.
And people that maybe don't have a calling, like the mother who's nameless, who doesn't even have a name or anything, she's the one who's the most sensible one out of the whole thing.
Mm.
And maybe it's the nameless or quiet ones in our area that if we listen to and we walk with, we learn the most from. That's my rant at the end. That's my truth bomb.
And I'm not going to respond to it because then we will never get off this, and
Okay.
I need to
All
make
right.
breakfast. So I'm just
Okay.
like, no, but yeah, let's
If you have a comment or want to
yeah,
talk to us, leave a comment
yeah,
on the YouTube. I'm gonna post my email on the underneath the YouTube. I'll ask Tim if he wants to,
yeah, please do.
as well. You can email us,
Mm.
talk to us, from just
Yeah.
engage with us a little bit, so we know if we're on the right track or off the right track or what we're doing, and that'd be
Mm.
awesome.
And I think next week we're going to look at a couple of starting next week, going to look at a few of Jesus' parables, particularly thinking about how we revisit themes and ideas, perhaps with a new lens. Also, we'll be touching on, I know it's been something people have asked about as well, kind of deconstruction and construction and rebuilding and all those sorts of things. So that's coming up. But I think, I think one thing I feel really challenged with every time I actually kind of take any time to sit in scripture is the ends don't justify the means, but we do need to do better.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and that,
Yeah.
well, every time I look at scripture, and I'm gonna keep this short because we gotta go. But it's the not everything is cut and dry, and not everything's perfect. Like even the most awesome people, Abraham, David, Samson or whatever,
Dave
they make
Sawatsky's muscles.
Dave Swasky's muscles. They make mistakes, and if we can see ourselves in there and know that we're gonna make mistakes, but there's still a way to go. Like there's still a path to follow. It's not the end. It's part of the journey. And I
Mm.
think that's encouraging to us, that we don't have to get everything right. We don't have to be perfect. We're we're just living this life and walking together. But
Mm.
anyway, toodles. Love you all.
Yeah,
Blessings.
yeah. Take it
And
easy.
yeah, have a great night. We'll see you next week.
Peace.